So once again, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Philippines. Welcome to this wonderful, warm, and very welcoming city of Cebu. I think we're all very impressed by the surroundings and the warmth of the people that we've met here so far. And last but not least, welcome to the APEC Pathfinder 2 dialogue. The first was held 2 years ago in Bangkok. 2 years have passed. It's good to revisit and to move forward on the issues we talked about there. We're starting with our keynote remarks from a very distinguished panel of experts, all of whom have a lot of experience in the field. So could I please say a very warm welcome to Her Honor Judge Conchita Caprio Morales, to Mr. Eric Needler, the political counselor from the US Embassy in the Philippines, to His Excellency Tin Maung, Commissioner of the Anti-Corruption Commission from Myanmar, to Assistant Secretary Lyndall Hoytink from Australia, and to the Undersecretary for Fisheries, Mr. Aziz Perez. And they are all very ably moderated and chaired by Mr. David Luna, who I'm sure needs no introduction to anybody here. And a very warm welcome to everybody also here, delegates, ladies and gentlemen. So if I can pass the proceedings over to David, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leslie. Good morning. On behalf of the United States and the Philippines, let me welcome you to the APEC Pathfinder 2 dialogue on combating corruption and illicit trade, and to continue the discussion from our first gathering in Bangkok, Thailand in 2013. It is an honor this morning to have with us our distinguished keynote speakers to help open Pathfinder 2 here in the lovely city of Cebu. And to all of you, our distinguished delegates, our Pathfinder family. And before I introduce our speakers and I would like to provide some contextual basis on this important APEC initiative. Let me thank the ACT membership and other key sub-fora partners, including EagleAD, the APEC Business Advisory Council, and the APEC Women's Partnership Initiative, and others. And of course, our international co-sponsors, UNODC, OECD, the American Bar Association, and the ABA Rule of Law Initiative for Asia for their leadership in helping to organize this program. In partnership with ASEAN, the Pacific Island Forums, APEC continues to elevate the fight against corruption and illicit trade across the Asia-Pacific region. As manifested in the ACT strategic plan endorsed by senior officials, and to meet our leaders' call for action, we continue pathfinding roads to advance APEC's overall agenda to build a better world, more inclusive economies with commitments towards green, sustainable economic growth, shared prosperity, and enduring peace and security. Corruption and illicit trade undermines these priorities and goals. The illegal economy and illicit trade that support and enable corruption and fuel organized crime converge across borders with other threats that together imperil the security and stability of markets, economies, and our communities. As such, the Pathfinder dialogue has focused on the need to combat corruption that facilitates and enables illicit networks engaged in trafficking in persons, wildlife, illegal timber, illegal fisheries, and the confiscating of criminal proceeds, and how they sabotage global supply chains, pillage natural resources, desecrate our human capital, and endanger our collective security. Emphasis has been on the importance of international partnerships and interregional cooperation, information sharing, best practices, and developing innovative ways to disrupt and dismantle the webs of criminality and corruption related to illicit trafficking. By strengthening international cooperation across borders, sectors, industries through a spirit of engagement and through partnerships for sustainable security, the APEC Pathfinder is committed to promote cultures of integrity across markets, public governance, and supply chains, and in the process safeguard our rainforests, endangered wildlife, fisheries, and oceans, and through fighting human trafficking, to protect our children and human capital and promote the empowerment of women across the Asia economies. In short, this is the Pathfinder framework that we embarked on to meet the APEC recommendation to our leaders to combat corruption and illicit trade. Now, it is an honor to present our first speaker, the Honorable Judge Conchita Coprio Morales, who is the Ombudsman of the Philippines and the 2015 ACT Chair. And Judge, you've done a tremendous job this year in the ACT. So please join me in welcoming Judge Morales.
Mr. David Luna, ACT Pathfinder Coordinator, Undersecretary Asis Perez of the Philippines, Commissioner Tin Mao of Myanmar, Mr. Eric Nidler of the USA, Honorable Greg Hunt of Australia, who will be joining us via video and through Assistant Secretary Lyndall Hoytink, distinguished session chairs and panelists, esteemed participants, fellow workers in government, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning. Let me especially thank the organizers of today's Pathfinder Dialogue 2 for two reasons. Gathering under one roof such an esteemed array of high-caliber resource persons who would be acting as chairs and facilitators as well as speakers and panelists, and for choosing the current burning issues as topics for discussion, from human trafficking to wildlife trafficking. The new insights and perspectives to be drawn from this dialogue shall carve out new channels for domestic and international operation in order to dismantle the web of criminal elements. It shall translate the idea into action, from text to context, from form to function, and from semantics to pragmatics. The various sessions shall assess the terrain and thereafter map the battlefield. Corruption cuts across all industries, sectors, and departments. Its pervasiveness is perverse. It cuts across all other functional areas of government. The work of the ACTW in terms of discussing law enforcement mechanisms finds new meaning and applicability when it is discussed, for instance, in cases of illegal fishing abetted by local executives. There would have been no illegal fishing or human trafficking if the public officers tasked to do their job did their part. Fraud must have existed somewhere in such a scenario. In one of his books, Randall Young informally defines fraud as a perpetration of a complex lie. It is therefore the duty of the anti-fraud professional to untangle this complexity and forthwith hail the perpetrators to the bar of accountability. In short, the anti-fraud professional must defeat the counterfeit. Sun Tzu's The Art of War instructs the combatant to know thy enemy. In this battle against all forms of fraud against the government, we must contend with the reality that the perpetrators are keeping up with the times and employing the most sophisticated means of, bluntly speaking, fooling the public. Consequently, it behoves us to arm ourselves with upgraded weapons and superior counter tactics to crush the enemy. The toughest weapon to combat a complex lie, however, is truth itself. With truth, you can never go wrong. If you go against the grain of truth by wittingly ignoring it or willfully suppressing it, your theory of the case will crumble ultimately. In pursuing the truth and enforcing public accountability, no one should be spared. No one can claim that he or she is beyond the reach of the long arm of the law. While there are crooks in government, there still remains a growing number of honest and dedicated public servants. Let us help them remain honest and keep them dedicated. Let us make sure that corrupt officials and employees in government that give public service a bad name get the punishment they deserve. Certainty of punishment aims to end the culture of impunity in corrupt areas where criminality still thrives. Let us therefore continue working toward ending the cycle of impunity and poverty and cultivate a culture of integrity and excellence. The Asia-Pacific region cannot afford to pause and lose the momentum. As I have continually underscored, stamping out the forces of corruption is as imperative as granting the region the full measure of the blessings of a robust economy. Good governance leads us closer to achieving inclusive growth, generating employment, and reducing poverty, and eventually and ultimately creating greater prosperity for the greatest number of people. Thank you, and mabuhay.
Thank you very much, Honorable Judge. Now let me introduce Councillor Needler to present the U.S. statement. Please.
Thank you, Director Luna, for that introduction. Judge Conchita Carpio Morales, APEC ACT Chair, Ombudsman of the Philippines. His Excellency, Tin Mong, Commissioner of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Myanmar. Assistant Secretary Lindell Hoytink, Ministry for the Environment, Australia. Undersecretary Assis Perez, Ministry of Agriculture, the Philippines. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the United States, let me welcome you to APEC Pathfinder 2 on fighting corruption and illicit trade, and to continue the dialogue from the first gathering in Bangkok in 2013. It is an honor to have with us this morning many of our friends and partners who made Pathfinder 1 a tremendous success in 2013, as well as all of you who are new to Pathfinder. It too is an honor to have with us our distinguished keynote speakers to help open Pathfinder 2 here in beautiful Cebu. Ombudsman Carpio Morales, let me also extend our appreciation for your leadership in chairing the APEC Anti-Corruption and Transparency Working Group in 2015. The Philippines has demonstrated a strong interest in protecting wildlife and natural resources, and we welcome the steps taken by the government to address the threat corruption and illicit trade poses to the livelihood and prosperity of the Philippine people. As Ambassador Goldberg noted in a ceremony earlier this year, in which we repatriated more than $1.3 million in corrupt assets, the United States stands with the Philippines and the agencies that pursue corruption as they work to ensure that public officials serve the public interest, not their own. At the first Pathfinder, we highlighted how the APEC Business Advisory Council had encouraged APEC leaders to make the fight against illicit trade a priority in APEC. We can certainly understand why. The expansion of the illegal economy, or the dark side of globalization, siphons off so much potential across our economies that, in some cases, it hampers our ability to build tomorrow's growth markets and investment frontiers. According to some estimates, the illegal economy accounts for 8 to 15% of world GDP, and maybe even higher in developing countries. In fact, according to Global Financial Integrity, if we were to measure illicit financial flows from just developing economies during the 2002 to 2013 period, that global illegal economy would be the world's third largest economy at $6.6 trillion US dollars. Impacted economies lose more money through corruption, transnational crime, and tax evasion than they receive in international aid. Ladies and gentlemen, corruption and illicit trade are simply robbing us of a better future. Instead of building communities with new roads, homes, schools, or hospitals, or providing for better health care, air quality, or cleaner oceans, corrupt actors and criminals are only financing their own greed. Since the endorsement of the APEC Santiago commitment to fight corruption and ensure transparency in 2004, APEC leaders have recognized how fighting corruption and promoting transparency are critical to sustaining economic development, growth, and prosperity. As noted earlier, we all understand that corruption undermines economic growth by raising the costs of doing business, creating uncertainty, stifling competitiveness, and deterring investment. So with this background, and consistent with one of APEC's overall priorities of inclusive green, sustainable development, the ACT has focused these Pathfinder workshops on combating corruption and illicit trade, fostering partnerships for security, and targeting harms that derail the sustainable futures of all economies, our environment and human capital, especially women and children. Illegal logging and deforestation exacerbate climate change and threaten the livelihoods of local communities. Poaching and trafficking of endangered wildlife is rapidly destroying iconic species and ecosystems. Corruption and bribery facilitate illegal fishing and jeopardize endangered marine life and global food security. President Obama and Secretary Kerry have underscored the U.S. government's commitment to addressing this issue through the release of a new U.S. national strategy to combat wildlife trafficking. Environmental crime is a lucrative business for criminals. It generally has a low risk of detection and high reward. For example, a recent World Bank study found that illegal logging in areas such as in Southeast Asia reap profits of $10 to $15 billion annually, while the probability that illegal loggers will be punished is less than 0.08%. The rainforests of the south of Asia Pacific are vital to the region's economy, providing food and income for millions of people. Indigenous peoples across the region also rely on rainforests for food, shelter, and medicine. Rainforests are biologically diverse and are home to many endangered animals and plants, like the orangutan. They affect the Earth's climate by capturing and storing millions of tons of carbon. Despite understanding this importance, in the 10 years prior to 2010, Southeast Asia lost approximately 11 million hectares of forest. Illegal logging and corruption are among the biggest drivers of deforestation in the Asia-Pacific region. Many of the world's fish stocks are depleted. Overfishing, harmful fishing practices, and illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing harm the ecology of the ocean, including the seabirds, marine mammals, and sea turtles that live in the same environment, and reduce the long-term potential of fish stocks to provide food and jobs. Human trafficking is also one of the largest, most profitable illicit trade areas. Modern slavery and human trafficking not only violate the individual's basic rights and freedoms, but also weaken the entrepreneurial spirit that nurtures innovation and openness, degrade human capital and potential, and stunt economic and political development. The International Labor Organization estimates that trafficked workers globally generate approximately $32 billion annually, with over 20 million women, men, and children estimated to have been trafficked globally in 2014, with many human trafficking victims coming here from Asia. As Secretary Kerry mentioned in his remarks on the release of the 2015 U.S. report on trafficking in persons, there's nothing inevitable about human trafficking. It is a choice. Changing the trafficking business model and related crimes that facilitate it is at the heart of combating this abuse. The Pathfinder dialogue is designed specifically to address this issue, to target corruption and crime that facilitate trafficking. I applaud the OECD and APEC for the development of the principles to combat corruption related to human trafficking that will be discussed at tomorrow's OECD APEC Roundtable. In closing, the APEC Pathfinder 2 dialogue is about building partnerships for sustainable security, expanding and strengthening existing networks, leveraging expertise and capacities to improve regional efforts to combat illicit networks, and safeguarding our endangered wildlife, rainforests, oceans, human capital, and most importantly, our children. Given the transnational, cross-border nature of illicit trade, we must partner together to protect our national assets, human capital, and natural resources, including through initiatives in APEC, ASEAN, and the Pacific Islands Forum that promote economic growth and sustainable futures. No economy is immune from corruption, and no single economy can prevent or combat corruption alone. The United States is very committed to these important issues, and I'm very happy that our law enforcement colleagues from the FBI, DHS's Homeland Security Investigations, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service are here with us to impart their experiences, best practices, and commitment to work across borders with all economies to disrupt and dismantle the illicit actors and networks behind today's illicit trade. Let me also thank the government of the Philippines for co-sponsoring this important dialogue with the United States, the United Nations Office of Drugs and Crime, and the American Bar Association. Policymakers, law enforcement authorities, academics, and representatives from international organizations, civil society, and the private sector all have a critical role to play, and we hope you will build and strengthen relationships at this dialogue. We look forward to our discussion today and on ways to strengthen international cooperation to combat corruption, environmental crimes, and illicit trade, and human trafficking across borders through vibrant partnerships for our collective sustainable security. Thank you for your partnerships here, and good morning to you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilor Niegler. May I invite His Excellency Thang Mong, the Commissioner for Myanmar, to present an ASEAN perspective. Thank you.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, I would like to congratulate the leaders of today's Pathfinder Dialogue for hosting this important event, especially, among others, Judge Conchita Carpio-Morales, the Philippine Chair of the APEC Anti-Corruption and Transparency Working Group, and Mr. David Luna, APEC Pathfinder Coordinator, U.S. Department of State. Some of you might recall that the Attorney General of Myanmar, Dr. Thun Shin, participated in the first Pathfinder Dialogue in 2013 in Bangkok. I am pleased to continue Myanmar's high-level support for this important forum today. It is my pleasure to give you an ASEAN perspective on fighting corruption and illicit trade. To provide this perspective, I'll draw upon the knowledge and priorities of the Anti-Corruption Commission, Myanmar, and I'll work with fellow leaders of the Southeast Asia Parties Against Corruption, CPEC. The leaders of the anti-corruption agencies in the Southeast Asia region gathered earlier this year in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, to attend the 10th section of meeting under the name Investigation and Prevention of Corruption in the Private Sector. The leaders reaffirm our common understanding that corruption is a global problem threatening the social and economic growth of the ASEAN countries. Southeast Asian anti-corruption leaders strongly support bilateral and multilateral cooperation to reduce corruption and mitigating its corrosive effect on development efforts in the region. Today's Pathfinder Dialogue is a great example of bilateral and multilateral cooperation to reduce corruption. International cooperation is essential to fight corruption in trafficking and smuggling persons, and illegal trade in natural resources, including illegal logging and wildlife trafficking. I congratulate the leaders of today's Pathfinder Dialogue for promoting international cooperation against corruption and these very harmful forms of illegal trade. I am also pleased to see many ASEAN anti-corruption agencies joining this effort here today. Through CPEC, ASEAN anti-corruption leaders had acknowledged the importance of the role of public-private partnership to promote integrity and transparency among the business sector. I welcome the Pathfinder Dialogue's inclusion of the private business sector here today. ASEAN anti-corruption leaders strongly support international cooperation to enhance the capacity of member agencies and have agreed this year on the following points. 1. CPEC members agencies, in line with the Article 48 and 49 of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption, UNCAC, have established a strong cooperative framework between and among each other so as to facilitate cooperation in the areas of anti-corruption investigation and prevention. And also, CPEC member agencies have made a significant effort to foster a strong public and private sector cooperation in order to enhance anti-corruption compliance in both sectors. Thirdly, CPEC member countries recognize that corruption does not only occur between the public and private sectors, but also between one private entity to another. As such, The private sector's role to ensure transparency and integrity in doing business indeed very important to create a level playing field at the domestic and international levels. It is important that for Southeast Asia agencies to have a strong legal framework to support national anti-corruption work in the private sector. For example, having a legal provision on corporate liabilities is equally important to ensure that the private sectors play their role in ensuring proportionate anti-corruption measures in their organizations. CPEC member agencies have agreed to form a working group to study and discuss the possibility of inclusion of CPEC as an entity under ASEAN. So these are the ASEAN perspectives we have performed up to date. In conclusion, I might say that the ASEAN colleagues, together with me, here today are showing their support, active support for the APEC Pathfinder agenda. As for Myanmar, I look forward to supporting future Pathfinder activities to prevent corruption in trafficking in persons, illegal trade in environmental resources. As noted above, I believe we will be most effective in combating corruption and transnational crime if we effectively engage the private sector in this very important work. Thanks for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Mong. Last November, during the APEC Leader Summit, which was hosted by President Xi Jinping and other APEC leaders, there was a consensus to launch the ACT-NET to strengthen cooperation. Around that time, Minister Hunt was also providing leadership to strengthen regional cooperation on rainforests and combating issues like illegal logging. The Honorable Minister has provided a video for us, and I would ask the APEC Secretary to play that video at this point. And it will be followed up by Assistant Secretary Hoi Ting.
Well, welcome to the APEC Pathfinders meeting. I am Greg Hunt, the Australian Environment Minister, and one of my real passions, deep passions, is rainforest preservation. And this is about communities, it's about biodiversity, and it's about climate change. But it's also about ensuring that what we do maintains and protects the dignity and the law of each of the states involved. And that's why your work at this meeting is so fundamental. So I am sorry that I can't be in Cebu. I was fortunate to visit Cebu and dive some of the beautiful reefs a number of years ago. And I am excited that David Luna is the chair, but disappointed that I can't be there with a really good friend and a really good man. David is one of the world's great anti-corruption fighters, and he's a genuine leader and he's a courageous figure. So, having said that, the challenge of corruption is the first thing I want to address. You know it, you live it, you work in this space, and what you are doing is fundamental in helping ordinary citizens, honest citizens, throughout the APEC region strive and prosper where they can without the heavy hand of corruption and organised crime making such an impact on their lives. It is literally empowering people to remove that threat. Against that background, in particular, the work on combating illegal logging and the illegal transport of timber is fundamental. It is not a victimless crime. It has an impact on communities. I have spoken with, just recently, the Environment Minister and the Forestry Minister in Papua New Guinea. My belief is that they are making real and profound change to some of the practices which they themselves identified as having had a huge impact on many of their own communities. Similarly, others within this meeting will have first-hand experience of the way that foreign concessions can encroach beyond their area to which they've been assigned legitimately, or worse than that, there can simply be illegal plunder through payoff of corrupt officials. This cannot stand. So it is important for you as senior crime fighters to realise that there is deep understanding and support behind what you do. It travels across the region. I know in our own country, some of the wholesalers and timber merchants who trade legally are deeply affected when there is illegal timber that enters the country. We have been fortunate to be able to deal with much of it. Effectively, the DNA tracking, which many have been able to put in place in different parts of the region, has helped Australia to protect our own legitimate domestic timber wholesalers. But they are also, as in many other countries, the victims of the illegal activity. So first and foremost, it is the forest and timber communities who rely on the forest who are the primary victims. But it is also the good and decent wholesalers who operate properly within the law and within the spirit of the law who are similarly affected. Now the next thing, having looked at the issue of corruption, and I support the work of both of the APEC streams in this space, and Australia fully supports the work of both of those streams. The next thing is to consider for a moment the value of rainforests within the broader region. As I mentioned at the outset, communities, biodiversity, and climate change. As we know, so many communities in developing countries have a fundamental reliance for their way of life, for their economic development, on maintaining and protecting the forests. It is the centrepiece of their existence. And those that come in break and destroy those communities, their culture, and indeed their history in many cases. So the importance of what you do coming out of Pathfinders should never be underestimated. But more than that, it's about protecting the majestic biodiversity of the Asia-Pacific region. To fly over parts of Papua New Guinea, Malaysia, to visit Indonesia, to see parts of Kalimantan on the island of Borneo, is to see a biological ark. But of course there are massive threats to it. But if we can maintain and enhance those areas, we are providing a sanctuary, not just for the forest, but for the immense biodiversity which sits within and lives in complementarity with those extraordinary rainforests. And then, perhaps as significantly as anything else, these forests are great storehouses of carbon. These forests are insurance in the battle against climate change. And growing new forests is perhaps one of the best things the world can do to take early remedial action, to take action now to reduce emissions and to regenerate land. So these are fundamental steps. So as you battle corruption, keep in mind the community benefit, the biodiversity benefit, and the climate change benefit. Not that you really need reminding, but they are critical. From Australia's perspective, our part is to support your work, but also to advance and to, in some small way, help lead the Asia-Pacific Rainforest Recovery Plan. Last year, in the lee of the World Parks Congress, we held the first Asia-Pacific Rainforest Summit. It was a tremendous success with 300 people, and the author and the architect and the agent of transformation, Lyndall Hoytink from Australia, is with you, and she will be a formidable presence. She's a great rainforest leader and champion. But coming out of it was a commitment to end net deforestation by 2030 and to halve net deforestation by 2020 within the Asia-Pacific region. Now the work is afoot to prepare the country annexes, and they in turn can help drive practice. They should not be mere pieces of paper, they should be living documents. And if each of you can help work with your countries to deliver those annexes, then as a region, we can take something special to Papua New Guinea. Last week, I agreed with the Papua New Guinean Environment Minister, John Pundari, and the Forests Minister, Douglas Tamuriisa, to work jointly, not just on the Asia-Pacific plan, but on a plan to take to Paris to ensure that rainforests are fully recognised for their biodiversity and, in particular, their carbon abatement opportunities, and that there are genuine incentives on a genuinely verified and monitored basis which come out of the Paris process, which will ensure that there are incentives for communities to make changes and for countries to make changes to their forest protection regimes, which will add to the existing carbon store compared with what would otherwise have been the case. This is a huge opportunity for the biodiversity of the world, for our carbon storehouses, and to help communities be empowered against corruption. I wish you all the best in your work. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not able to join David, not able to join yourselves, and not able to be in the magnificent Cebu, but you will do fine work. It's important work. I wish you all power. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt and the Government of Australia. Assistant Secretary Hoytink. Yeah.
I'm not going to add a lot more today to what my Minister has just said. However, I suspect I fit a very different profile to the rest of you here today. I'm not involved in the business of fighting corruption and illicit trade. I'm in the business of developing a rainforest recovery plan for the Asia-Pacific region. We're talking government to government, and we are asking all governments in the region to consider developing a country annex, and you heard a little bit about that today with my Minister. This country annex will have a series of points. It will have what they're working on at the moment, what are the key drivers, what are their priorities, and they are written against a series of themes. And one of our key themes is combating illegal logging, and that includes the illegal wildlife trade as well. The second part of the annex will be to develop a what next and what do you need assistance with. We're going to use that to turn it into a regional roadmap, and we're going to leverage investment from that. So at the same time as speaking to a range of different governments, we've also been speaking to a range of investors within the rainforest environment, within the forest environment, and there's a lot of people, a lot of money in this space at the moment. So there's just a couple of statistics I'd like to share with you that give a bit of a feel to what we're attempting to do. Rainforests cover less than 2% of the Earth's surface, but house half of the world's plant and animal species. Asia-Pacific rainforests are significant globally. Despite representing a quarter of the world's land area, the Asia-Pacific region is home to 4 of the world's 12 mega biodiversity countries. 250 million hectares of rainforests are across the Asia-Pacific. Yet, we know from the IUCN that around 50 soccer fields of rainforest are lost from the world every minute. That's a rate that is just not sustainable. So hence we're doing what we're doing. So I'll come at a slightly different angle to anything today. I'll come at things from how can we practically take this forward? What can we do? What are the measures we can use? Because that's what I'll be putting in my roadmap, which is slightly different to where you're all coming from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Assistant Secretary Hoytink, and thank you for the leadership of Australia in protecting our rainforest, our environment, and our biodiversity, and for working with Pathfinder and APEC on these important issues. Now let me introduce Undersecretary Perez, who will be speaking about illicit fishing. Thank you.
To the APEC ACT Chairperson and Ombudsman of the Philippines, Justice Conchita Carpio Morales, ma'am. To the U.S. Embassy Manila Political Counselor, Mr. Eric Nedler?
Sounds good.
Sorry. Of course, to the Commissioner of the Anti-Corruption Commission of Myanmar, His Excellency Tin Maung, the APEC Pathfinder Coordinator of the U.S. Department of State, Senior Director, Mr. David Luna, to the delegates, members of APEC Economies, friends, good morning. Allow me to first express my sincerest appreciation to the Office of the Ombudsman and to the U.S. Department of State for this opportunity to be part of this dialogue, which aims to strengthen our collective fight in corruption and illicit trade in the Asia-Pacific region. We thank our ACT Pathfinder Coordinator, Mr. David Luna, and his team for their diligence and commitment to combat corrupt practice which endanger our peoples and environment. We are confident that all your hard work will pay off and will be used to the advantage and sustainable growth of the APEC economy. Now, the question is why is the fishing sector invited in this meeting? You see, if there's any, and of course, without looking at the forestry sector, because I'm from the fishing sector, you see, if there's any community or sector in the economy that's affected by bad practice and corruption, I would argue that it's the fishing sector. You see, case in point, if a commercial fishing vessel that is not allowed to fish in a particular body of water enters that water, then the statement of the Honorable Justice Conchita Carpio Morales is correct. There must be something wrong because it's illegal to go in there. And once they start catching fish, they'll probably get maybe, in our language, 1,000 tabs. You know, these are containers. And the product of these 1,000 tabs or containers will go to probably 2 to 3 individuals and their workers, so 30 people, so you have 33 persons benefiting from this illegal action. But those 1,000 tabs could have been taken by 1,000 individual fishers involving 1,000 families. So you can see the impact immediately of corruption in the fishing sector. And we're talking about not for a year. We're talking about one night of corrupt activity, illegal corrupt activity allowed to happen in a coastal community. So, you see, and that's why I'm very thankful to Thomas Hamang for inviting us. Probably this is the first time that the fishing sector will be given opportunity to make a presentation in this very important dialogue. The Philippine economy, through the administration of President Aquino, has been advocating for and working hard to achieve a corruption-free government for the past 5 years. In fact, curbing corruption in all levels of government is part of the administration's social agenda of inclusive growth and poverty alleviation. The administration's banner slogan that says, "Kung walang korap, walang mahirap. Literally translated to, if there were no corruption, there would be no poverty. We might say that this is easier said than done, and that corruption-free government does not necessarily result to inclusive growth among the citizens of a country. But for a nation that has suffered badly due to corrupt practices and imprudent government transaction, fighting corruption is one solid step to attain a government that puts welfare of its people first over its own vested interests. Our belief is that by eliminating corruption, we are also allowing good governance to reign. And good governance is necessary in introducing programs and projects, such as even appropriate infrastructures that will allow efficient delivery of genuine social services to our people, most especially to the poorest community of this country. And therefore, we look at an anti-corruption platform as a socially oriented economic platform. It is not corruption to fight the bad guys, but this is not an anti-corruption to fight the bad guys, but this is an anti-corruption measure that results into economic growth and justice, social justice and equity. In the Philippine setting, the Department of Agriculture to the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources has been instituting reforms to promote sustainable fishing and eliminate illegal, underreported, unregulated fishing practices through an interagency and multi-level government initiatives. Our goal is sustainable economic development for our fishing communities and the protection of our fisheries and aquatic resources from which our people derive their food supply and livelihood. By doing so, we are also keeping our people from participating in illicit activities that violates the integrity of our own environment. In 2013, President Aquino signed Executive Order Number 154, which establishes the Philippine Commission on Illegal, Unreported, and Unregulated Fishing. Along with this is a national plan of action to prevent, deter, and eliminate IUF. This has been adapted to serve as legal basis and comprehensive guide for pursuing actions against illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Early this year, the government also pushed for the enactment of Republic Act 10654, a legislative reform which has amended the Philippine Fisheries Code of 1998 and introduced sharpened provisions against IUU fishing. RA 10654 is a proof of our stance advocacy to protect our marine resource and to ensure its sustainable use. One of the amendments is the increase of penalties for serious infringement of law. We want to make sure that the penalties were hurt enough to deter violators from repeating their action and prevent others for committing the same infringement. When I was younger, I was an environmental advocate, and I conducted a study on illegal fishing in one bay. And I was so proud because I trained most of the volunteer enforcers. And they were able to file 800 cases in 4 years. And in a very small place. And what happened was, this is the only place where we have 80% conviction rate. 80% conviction rate in illegal fishing. But when we analyzed the data further, it indicated that there is a 90% repeat offender rate. And so, despite the fact that you're able to apprehend, despite the fact that you're able to prosecute successfully, the fact that the penalty is very low does not deter, and in fact promotes continuing violation. That's why currently the stakeholder in the Philippine fisheries are on the last stretch of drafting the implementing rules and regulations. Infrastructure for post-harvest are also being established. Among these is the construction of community fish landing center in strategic locations nationwide. But then again, what does it do with anti-corruption? Well, aside from decreasing post-harvest losses and improving socio-economic condition of fishing communities with high poverty incidence, the establishment of fish landing center is instrumental in resource management and in monitoring fish catch. Because if you have like 500 landing sites, all the scientists will do is to go there and record, so you don't have to go anywhere. And the prevention and apprehension of crimes against the environment, because there is where you do your monitoring, control, and surveillance. So sometimes infrastructure is also an important element to an anti-corruption drive. The Philippines is also stepping up system on traceability of fish and fish products through the development of a traceability system which will be called the field catch. So this is a traceability, full traceability of all our fisheries products. The country is preparing for the implementation of a catch certification scheme by solving issues on audit, monitoring, processing activities, weights and measure, conservation and management measure, and a simplified catch certification system. Without this legal administrative reform, it will remain a serious challenge for the Philippine economy to ensure that all fisheries products are not from illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. Philippine flag vessels are now being monitored through a fully functional vessel monitoring system, particularly for those fishing in the high seas and also those fishing outside Philippine jurisdiction. We have a scheduled timeline for making sure that all commercial fishing vessels in the Philippines will be covered by the BMS system. The efforts to register all fishers, fishing vessels, and gears are also continuing. Today, we have 1.6 million registered fishers, all of them with faces, addresses, you know each one of them. This is a management measure that will help us see clearly how big the industry is and how much pressure is being exerted to the fishing ground. At the local community level, the construction of seaborne assets is still ongoing. New units of fishing boats are intended to strengthen the agency's capacity in conducting sea patrol. This is not to catch the violators, but this is more to prevent violations from happening. Last year, the Philippine government entered into another phase of partnership with the U.S. economy in combating wildlife trafficking and other environmental crimes. Along with the Fish and Wildlife Service of the United States, the Philippine economy signed a memorandum of understanding that will enable the Philippine economy to tap on the resources of the National Fish and Wildlife Forensics Laboratory in Ashland, Oregon. These are some of the examples of our effort to fulfill our commitment and collaborate with other economies. Various regional efforts to fight IUUF, such as the APEC implementation of the Regional Plan of Action against IUUF and the Coral Triangle Initiative, which is a 10-year plan to prevent IUUF, is also being done. We are now in the good position to continue and further promote action against corruption and illegal activities which put our people, environment, and economies at risk. We are, as we participate in the workshop today, may we develop brilliant ideas which will strengthen our cooperation with our regional community. Let us also participate and remember that our efforts can only be sustained if we would keep in mind that cooperation spells better opportunities for our people. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and congratulations to the Office of the Ombudsman of the Philippines and the U.S. Department of State and the whole APEC Anti-Corruption and Transparency family for the successful event. Magandang umaga and welcome to Cebu.
Thank you very much, Undersecretary Perez. ACT Chair Judge Morales, thank you again for your leadership. I think our keynote speakers have sharpened and strengthened, again, the call by our APEC leaders to combat corruption and the illicit trade and building partnerships for sustainable security. And I think this agenda nicely advances the Philippines' vision for APEC 2015 in building more inclusive economies and building a better world. Thank you very much. I would like to invite Peter Ritchie, who will be the chair for the next session on threat convergence, but I encourage the keynote speakers for a couple seconds to take a keynote speaker photograph. Thank you.